dissatisfaction with the fact that people who are being paid to do certain jobs are not completing those things, because these things have been there for such a long time, and permanent secretaries have come and gone within those various ministries, and yet we have not seen any sort of resolution to those issues. So the appointment of persons on oversight committee is just one thing, but more than that, that's just on paper. More than that is the fact that we got the impression that this was already in a cabinet conclusion. I could have gone to fire officers and said, this is what the Prime Minister has said. If you agree to this, there's a cabinet conclusion confirming that, So apart from the lack of a cabinet conclusion, which we were given the impression that we were going to receive, the contents of the letter does not portray the sentiments expressed at the meeting, and there are certain things in the letter that was not mentioned to us at the meeting as well. So we're still not getting the sense of genuineness in this to correct the issues, and as long as there's not genuineness, I think firefighters are going to continue to feel like there's no real interest in resolving the issues. More so that our letter to the Ministry of the Public Service points to the fact that we said we want tangible results. Tangible results, because there are things that can actually be done before we go back on the job. And I want the employer to focus on that.
What is at the top of the list?
Reclassification. Reclassification, which is not a case of reinventing the wheel, because it is already existing within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force.
But wouldn't the Oversight Committee deal with all those issues?
There wasn't an Oversight Committee when the Royal St. Lucia Police Force was given reclassification, I mean, it's already existing. The minister in his discussions with me expressed that the Minister of the Public Service has basically agreed that if this thing exists within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, they see no trouble in extending into the St. Lucia Fire Service. So the issue of reclassification and the promotions policy and, as the minister calls it, 5 low-hanging fruits, to me, there's no real need for the Oversight Committee to get into that, because except, of course, for the review of the St. Lucia Fire Service Act, which is a broader issue. But the removal of contracts for our current probationers, for example, you don't need an oversight committee to look into that and to decide that somebody's contract for 6 months rather, by the time it ends, that they have to wait an additional 2 months to get the new contract, and they've not been paid for these 2 months while they wait and so on. At the meeting, the discussion was around the fact that those persons should not be given contracts to extend at least for the 2-year probationary period. But the letter doesn't express that.
Yeah, but I don't think that the authorities, the government just want to be very thorough and look at it from a scientific point of view.
No, Tim, no, it's already existing.
With that issue.
It's already existing. And this new letter, whereas our discussions at the meeting said removal of 6-month contracts and to make it 2 years long instead of 6 months, this new letter even says what it is that I'm saying, that the government is committed to review the policy and procedures in the fire service regarding probationary employment and to implement an arrangement similar to what obtains in the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. So it is already existing. This is not a case of having to reinvent the wheel or scientific studies and all these kinds of things. Those are things, I think, that the employer can implement within a very short space of time. And it's those things that fire officers are seeing and saying that there's no real commitment, and this time from the Prime Minister's end, to resolve this issue. And to issue this type of letter, and we're now being told that the Prime Minister left the country today, So we still are at the very, and as I said earlier, I think the Prime Minister has taken this thing back to the very beginning and eroded the progress that we made with the Minister of Labour.
So therefore, there isn't any end in sight to this ticklish problem, which certainly has implications not only for fire officers, but the entire St. Lucian society. I mean, the family members of fire officers could be impacted detrimentally as well.
And I heard the Minister of Home Affairs mention that. And again, I say, we are not alone in this. What is the minister saying? Is he saying that he doesn't have a family who's going to be impacted?
Yeah, but forget the minister. The fact is, all of us can be impacted,
all of us impacted, yes.
Including family members of fire officers.
Yes, but don't say family members of fire officers, Tim. Just say all of us, because we're all in this together. So when you say that to fire officers, you're making them believe as if you better be back on the job because your family could be affected by this. No, every single family in St. Lucia could be affected by this. And the fact that the employer, in my opinion, and again, I want to single out Minister King. I think Minister King is really committed to this, to resolving it. But of course, he has a higher authority. that St. Lucians would continue to suffer. And I get the impression that the employer is really trying to get to the point where this thing turns sour for, sadly, a St. Lucian family, and then hoping that the St. Lucian public will turn on firefighters and say that it is our fault. Whereas this is not even an issue under the current administration. Tonight, again, the leader of the opposition has pointed out that under his administration, they sought to clarify certain things. And, this has not been resolved. What is so difficult about the employer at least saying, you know what, we're going to get this reclassification thing out of the way so you guys can at least feel that something has been done? Because that's what our letter has expressed. The driver's license issue, do you need an oversight committee for that? To just waive the fees for driver's license. I'm not saying that there's not a process, but you don't need an oversight committee for that. So I think there are options for the employer to make this look real, to show that they're truly committed to this, and to show, as they have said within their own social media platforms and so on, that they're listening. So don't just say that you're listening, but show us that you are listening. And I think this is something that St. Lucians really need to take serious.
What concessions are you willing to make?
We're ready to go back to work. We're ready to go back to work. We're just asking the employer to give us at least one thing. Just one. Just one.
And you do not want it to go through the bureaucratic process of oversight?
There is a process for everything. Mm-hmm. There is a process for everything. I'm just saying that I don't think you need an oversight committee to look into because the oversight committee is really into look into the implementation of the recommendations coming out of the 2016 report. And those recommendations are a bit more strategic and technical and so on, and I understand that. And hence the reason why we selected 5 low-hanging fruits. And again, low-hanging in that you can pick it, you can reach it, You don't need an oversight committee for it, except, as I said, the review of the Fire Service Act. So again, that's what we want. We want the employer to show that they're really interested in resolving this issue, and at least meeting us halfway by giving us maybe just one of the 5. Just one.
It appears that we have reached a stalemate.
I don't think so.
What will cause the fire officers to return to work?
One of those low-hanging fruits?
If not?
We go back to the drawing board and we decide how it is that we can re-strategize and, but we out here reaching out. We're out here reaching out. We've been reaching out for 20 years, team. 20 years. Can't we be given that concession? We have been reaching for 20 years. The employer comes in every 5 years, I don't even want to say that because people have made this political and it may sound like I'm saying they're not going to be there for the next 5 years. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is their terms are 5 years. They may be there, they may not be there, and so we may find ourselves under another administration. But we have been saying these things for 20 years. There's nobody who's concerned to say, let us meet the firefighters at some point. They keep saying that we are important to the nation. They keep saying what it is that we do is so essential. Why is it that in all of this, that you can't say, let's take care of our firefighters and let's give them at least one thing?
Now, the committee is expected to develop and submit to Cabinet for consideration within 30 days an action plan showing implementation timelines. Right. Isn't that sufficient? At least, isn't the government giving the impression at least that it is willing within a specific period, within a specific time frame, to deal with the concerns of the island's firefighters?
Yes, you read that, you will get that impression. Coming out of last night's meeting, we were told that the committee would have been implementing within the 30 days. That is what we were told. And we sought clarification on it. This is not the minister saying that and we just walked away from it. Mm-hmm. We sought clarification from the minister. Is that the mandate for the oversight committee, that they would be implementing within 30 days, and having submitted the report, there would have been certain things implemented already within those 30 days, and maybe beyond that to continue the process of implementation? The letter doesn't say that. The letter now says that the oversight committee will be submitting a plan for implementation and timelines. So you see what is happening to us. We hear one thing. When it's documented, it's something completely different. We were expecting it at 10 a.m. We get it at 4 p.m. We're told that there's a cabinet conclusion. Cabinet met on Monday. This is Thursday. You mean there's not a cabinet conclusion as yet to confirm what is it that the employer intends to do? So I really think that the employer they can do certain things, but they're really dragging it to not make it look like this is a fight that the fire service won and that they lost. This is not a fight. This is not a fight. We've been crying. Give us one. One. That's all it takes. One.
Is that the same approach that's being taken by firefighters? The fact that you probably are playing to the gallery and do not lose out to the government, to the authorities?
Yes, but you must understand, Tim, that, as I said, we've been asking for 20 years. 20 years. Can the government give us one? 20 years. Why can't you reach out and say, we understand your importance, we understand your significance, we're committed to this. And I said to the Prime Minister last evening, we appreciate everything that has been done under his administration.
The Prime Minister or the Labour Minister?
No, I said after the meeting, the Prime Minister himself called me, So I said to him, and he was expressing that, his administration is committed to resolving this. And he mentioned some of the things that has been done, a new station at Babuno, additional staff, through the Wishmaker Foundation that his wife is heading. Certain refurbishments have been done at Soufriere, kitchens refurbished, the bathrooms and so on. All of these things are welcomed. We welcome those things. However, like I said to him, even within the 5 low-hanging fruits, the employer can give us all 5 of those within a month, say. The critical issue of the environment, which we are going back to, of the intimidation and so on, may very well bring us back to this sort of environment within 5 years' time. Because yes, fire officers may be appeased with, the waiver of license fees, no contracts for probationers, and reclassification. But when you go back to the job and there's still no equal opportunity for promotions, there's intimidatory tactics being applied, and so on, because that is the real issue. So all of those things can be dealt with.
What would the intimidatory tactics? Who would be at whose hands that would be?
The employer's representative, management. And it's been highlighted again through the Commission of Inquiry, and you would have known of the removal of the former chief fire officer and those kinds of things. Recently, the current chief with the letter, and I just spoke with the chief this evening, just prior to coming to, and I said to him, I'm a bit, I think his letter was of poor taste, that it didn't portray any kind of evidence that he understands what is happening in the fire service, but rather it went to touch on the issue of violations and a possible disciplinary action and so on. And I asked him, do you think that all of the issues that we're talking about, whether those things don't exist in the fire service? And he says yes. And I said, so why didn't your letter just touch on the fact that those things actually exist, and that you too would like to see a speedy resolution on those issues, but not the issue of we have unauthorized absence, violation of the collective agreement, possibility of disciplinary action. We didn't seek permission from him to have a meeting while we were out on industrial action. None of those things were warranted, So,
but aren't those concerns legitimate as well? Because you would have your concerns, and in any relationship, and when relationships break down, I think both sides should take some form of responsibility. What responsibility you think that the firemen and women of St. Lucia should take as far as the inability of the authorities to come to some kind of amicable settlement as far as those grievances are concerned?
Again, Tim, I think it's critical, and I asked the Prime Minister that last night in our conversation, telephone conversation. He keeps mentioning the violation of law, and I asked, and I've asked on many occasions, which piece of legislation is it that we have violated? Nobody has been able to quote that piece of legislation. However, they quote the collective agreement, which speaks to a grievance procedure that in the employer's understanding that we violated that procedure by not going through the process outlined in it. The grievance procedure also says that when a grievance is raised, that grievance should be dealt with promptly. That grievance was raised 20 years ago. Is 20 years prompt? There's no promptness in dealing with the issue, but just a focus on you didn't go through a process, you violated this law. Why don't we say, okay, and I said to him too, if it is that you're going to point to the collective agreement and highlight violations within the collective agreement, you yourself as an employer have violated sections of our collective agreement because this is signed between us. And one of the things that I pointed to him was an article in the collective agreement that says that the employer will set up benchmarks for promotions, but promotions are continuing in the fire service without benchmarks. People don't even know what it takes to get from one rung to the other, So the issue of violation and responsibility applies on both ends, And if I said to the Minister of Labour during our meeting that we must do this together. We must do this together. And if we're not committed to each other to getting this done, and we're going to play the game of violation, intimidation, we're never going to resolve this. The issues are genuine. There are persons who are affected by this negatively. The St. Lucian public itself is affected by this negatively. And I think St. Lucians too. And I really appreciate, rather, the support that we've been getting from the St. Lucian public in terms of having understood that, throughout many administrations and prime ministers, we even established with the Minister of Labour that this has gone through 6 prime ministers, including himself as a prime minister. So there are responsibilities rather on both ends, but I think in between those responsibilities is a real issue, and we need to seek as to how it is that we're going to resolve those.
God forbid, if we have a catastrophe on our hands in St. Lucia that would warrant the intervention of our fire officers, the assistance of our striking fire officers, will they turn out? Will they come to our rescue? The question I'll be posing to Mr. Felix in just a moment. You're watching Newsmaker Live. Please stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television with me, Timothy Polio, and my guest, who is the president of the St. Lucia Fire Service Association, Mr. Shane Felix. What if something catastrophic were to happen in St. Lucia, warranting fire officers, striking fire officers to come to our rescue? What would happen?
All fire officers are going to be on the job. I don't think that there's anything that's going to happen in any community that a fire officer resides in that is not going to respond to. I think your training as a fire officer really, and fire officers have been basically saying that, they miss what it is that they do. The principle there, though, is we do not want to go back to an environment that we said we are not satisfied with. So you're asking us to go back to an environment that we're not satisfied with, not having done anything for us. So any community, and I can guarantee you that any community where there is something of a certain magnitude that a fire officer resides in, you would see that fire officer springing to his feet and getting into action and trying to assist and making sure that this thing is dealt with.
Why the distrust of the authorities, the government ministers, the prime minister? And I'm saying, and you have been saying that this dates back to several administrations.
Right.
Can you pinpoint why do you believe that the governments have basically taken firefighters for granted? Based on what you're saying, that's what it is.
That's a good question. I think, Tim, that fire officers there is this culture in the fire service where we're comfortable, we appreciate our comfort zone. We don't want to make much of a sacrifice to get us to the point of, recognition and respect. We want the respect, we want the recognition, but the sacrifice that comes with it is not something that we've really decided upon within ourselves. And during our various deliberations, I've been making this a critical point to fire officers that apart from understanding the sacrifice that's going to get us there, we must also understand the need to empower ourselves.
What are those sacrifices?
For example, there is the issue of officers. One time we met for a general meeting, and we were deciding as to what sort of action it is that we can present, or how it is that we were going to deal with our issues. And somebody suggested a march, a public march. When we got around to discussing the march and asking, who was going to be present and so on, very little participation in terms of who was going to be there. I think we do not want to be too visible. For example, recent industrial action by firefighters in Martinique, all firefighters were on the streets, with the placards and all that kind of thing. I would love to see us as firefighters get to that point where we request for a public march and we're on the streets expressing our frustration and dissatisfaction with what is happening with us. And more so, as I've said earlier, that the things that are happening in the fire service has wider implication for the public service itself, because it expresses what is happening within the public service, within the ministries and so on. But we need to understand that we have to come out of our comfort zone in order to be able to achieve what it is that we're really looking for.
You also made reference to firefighters, there's need for them to empower themselves.
Oh, yes.
In what way?
And there is, first, of course, the responsibility of the employer and the employer's representative to get that done. One of the concerns that I have is the fact that you have recruits who are going through the training academy and having come out of complete training, 6 months, 5 months, but have never been given a copy of the Fire Service Act, which is what governs you on the job. We've asked as an association for us to be allowed to come in and speak to those recruits while it is that they were training, and to at least share some sentiments and give copies of those documents and so on. We've not been able to get that done. But I think it's paramount that recruits understand the difference between the training manual and the Fire Service Act. There is the impression that when they are on the job, they continue to operate under the conditions of the training manual, not having known what the Fire Service Act says. And not just recruits. We've seen this throughout the ranks, all the way up to management. And let me give you a critical example. You come into the fire service and you basically accept what has been said to you. One of the things is that everybody's told that the association represents from station officer down to fireman, whereas the Fire Service Act says that the Fire Service Association represents from the deputy chief fire officer down. The only person not represented by the association is the chief fire officer. Even under this current impasse, somebody asked about a certain officer who was in management not being a member of the association. So there is this lack of, empowerment, as I said, and I've asked fire officers to make it, a priority to get involved. I'm not going to just give you a copy of a document that you have no interest in. I want to see that you are interested in it and that you're going to take some time to go through there, learn certain things, and to build and strengthen the foundation that the association is. Because if you don't know certain things, and you're going to come to a representative of the association every single time to ask him, what does this document say and what does that document say? It means that we're losing time and effort on other things that we could have been doing. Whereas you now, if you go ahead and you learn those things and you empower yourself, you would have strengthened what it is that we're doing as an association. You don't have to come to us to ask us about those documents.
Isn't that symptomatic of the mindset of our fire officers? And maybe it has everything to do with even their performance on the job, don't you think? If they're not taking interest in their own welfare, to understand what is in an act that would be governing their performance and so on. Don't you think that's symptomatic of how they perform in their duties as fire officers, as emergency personnel?
No, I think there's a separation in terms of your training. Your training takes care of how it is that you perform. I think fire officers love what it is that they do. We love what it is that we do. But the separation is that, and as I said at this morning's meeting, there's an issue of, for example, insubordination. And insubordination is as simple as, according to the Fire Service Act, your demeanor, your approach to a senior officer, how it is that you express yourself and so on. And so if a fire officer, having not known that, gets to a point where emotions arrive and so on, and he may have expressed himself in a certain manner, and that matter is taken up for disciplinary action, he can be disciplinary action can actually be instituted against him for the fact that he wasn't even aware that his demeanor is a concern for disciplinary action. So that's the manner in which I speak, that you know those things, you know your limits, you know your obligations in terms of the law and that kind of thing, but not necessarily in the performance of their duties, because that is their training, and the training manual takes care of that. They've had the training manual for about 6 months. They're very familiar with it. Not having had the Fire Service Act is what I'm saying, that there may be issues that could impact them that, may be actually on a negative side of things, and they need to understand that they have to empower themselves to avoid, getting along those lines.
So why did they not have the Fire Service Act do they have it in their possession?
Yes, it is available. It is available. Just as the Public Service Staff Order says that it is the employer's responsibility to give every single public officer a copy of the staff orders.
But you're talking about the discipline force. I mean, you're talking about, let's say, the Royal Settlement Police Force, right, understanding their role, their functions, responsibilities, and so on. And the same should obtain for every profession, including fire officers.
Definitely.
So why?
I think it's a culture, as I said, that you come into the department, there's no real focus on it having come into the department. And that is why, as an association, I've tried to make it a priority that we empower fire officers along those lines, and to cause that difference over time, fire officers will see the need to really empower themselves. That would strengthen what the association represents. And as you're saying, I think too, having understood those things, not necessarily in the training, but it would make you a better fire officer in terms of representing the fire department, your department, your professionalism, and so on. So that is critically important.
Why do you continue to serve as president of the association, considering that you're dealing with almost a mountain of problems that date back, according to you, to the last 4 decades?
Yes, and that is why I'm actually serving. I am dedicated to this. I came into the department and I found the culture. I want to give an example of something that happened to me, just as I explained. And it's from my own experience that I'm able to say to firefighters, those are some of the things that we need to correct. By 2003, I was elected as the association secretary, having been appointed in 2000. And since then, I haven't reneged on that. I've continued up to the point of chairman. But by 2005, the association's rules were being amended. And one of the critical things in there was the formation of the executive. The old law required for the executive to have certain ranks on it. We changed that to just anybody who's interested to serve on the executive, you put yourself forward and you serve. We included, however, in the law that the association only represents from station officer down to fireman, not realizing that the actual principal act is already saying that the association represents from deputy chief down to fireman. But I wasn't even aware of that because I had not read the Fire Service Act. It's having gone through the trenches and experiences and so on, I'm learning that we actually placed something in the act that is contrary to what is in the principal act. And that is just an example of having been brought into the department, accepting the norms, the cultures, and the practices, and not putting yourself in a position to actually learn for yourself. So I think that is one of, if anything, a very significant change or transformation that is critical to change in the fire service and to get fire officers to a point of, as I said, well-rounded officers, and to improve on what it is that we do and our department and so on. So
your tenure ends when?
It has ended. We're actually into the 3rd year. The tenure is 2 years. And we have written to the chief fire officer expressing the fact that we have sensitized the members. We would like to see persons who have a true interest in this and a genuine concern to what has happened to fire officers over the years, the practices, the norms, and so on, the transformation process, and the modernization that the former Prime Minister spoke of, to present themselves to serve. There was a request from the chief officer for names to be nominated. The chief officer has informed us that he has not received enough names because you are supposed to have 14 persons serving on that executive. We also think that is too many. We're trying to change that as well, but he has not received enough names. And so that is a concern for us, that this tenure has gone into the 3rd year. We think it is about time that the chief officer does call elections. I think we're at the point where persons have seen the need to serve, and it's an opportune time for the chief officer to request those nominations again to have the process continue, because he presides over the elections process. Will you
be seeking re-election?
I did submit my name actually when the first set of nominations were requested, and I'm hoping that this stands because I don't know that there's any what is the word that I'm looking for, that it expires rather. So yes, my name has been submitted. Again, I am really committed to this. I'd really like to see, because I myself am a fire officer, I'm not just the chairman of the association. Whatever it is that the association achieves benefits me. So it is voluntary work. Unlike other unions, I think certain stipends are paid to certain positions. This is all voluntary. Certain members have suggested certain things be done for the chairman and so on, but I have said to them that we really need to get to the point of having made certain achievements, change of laws and so on, to really justify the need for that, rather than just because you think that I'm truly dedicated to this, you just give it to me. So this is more than just one person. This is really about the St. Lucia Fire Service, more so that the documents over the years have really provided the evidence that there are issues to be dealt with. And so the employer needs to correct those issues. And that is the real mandate, that we continue to pursue the implementation of those recommendations to make the St. Lucia Fire Service what it is really supposed to be.
How have you been affected by serving as on the executive of the association? If you have, I don't know.
Yes, my stance as chairman and secretary as well. I think there has been much negative response to this because of the stance it is that I'm taking. Again, you must understand the culture that you should not challenge the status quo. But the status quo is what has kept us where we are today. And maybe one of the reasons why is it that we are unable to achieve some of the things that we're trying to achieve. Some of my colleagues in the very beginning would say to me, if you don't stop talking, you're going to be transferred to Canaries with a hose and a pump. Canaries doesn't have a fire station. But they say that to express the true nature of the department. That you don't stop talking, we're going to transfer you to somebody that doesn't even have a fire station. Some of my colleagues say to me, they make it into a joke, that if I don't want to be seen with you because I do not want to get to the point of not being promoted. And I've said to people, every rumor starts with the truth. Nothing just builds from somewhere, just like that. There's a misinterpretation of a truth that builds into a rumor. So we understand the nature of the department. Excuse me. We may joke about it and so on, but the truth is, it is existing, and I think, if anything, that is critical in terms of the transformation that we're seeking, that the employer must understand that those things exist. And apart from the tangible things that we're asking for, we're also placing emphasis on that kind of culture to be addressed, And again, today I said to fire officers, it reminds me of something that Martin Luther King Jr. said, that a law may not change a man's heart, but it can control how he reacts to me. And so there must be checks and balances in the department to control how it is that our managers operate. There must be the semblance of transparency, equal opportunity, and those kinds of things. And I'm really fighting to see that the next person who's going to serve in the capacity of either secretary or chairman of the association doesn't have to go through the kind of battles that I've endured just to make sure that fire officers are represented in the kind of manner. We must ensure that, these things are put in place and that somebody will see the need to step up and to serve and to continue the legacy, not of Shane Felix rather, but there are persons before me, team, who have similar stories of having served and never given an opportunity for promotion or acting or training overseas and so on. And I can give you several examples of those, but that would, of course, go way too far. So yes, I've been impacted negatively. And I think this is what actually commits me to this, because it says that I'm doing what is right. In a memo to the Prime Minister, I gave some of those examples, and that was even misinterpreted by some of my colleagues. Some of my colleagues think that it is a personal attack on them. An example of something happening to Timothy Polion, and Timothy Polion was punished. This same thing happens to Shane Felix, but Shane Felix is allowed to go through scotch-free. I'm saying this, as pointed out in the report of the Commission of Inquiry, different strokes for different folks should not be happening in the St. Lucia Fire Service, that the law applies to everybody. How else can I prove that these things are happening except to give an example? This is not an attack on any individual, but to point that this is a serious issue and those things must be addressed. So those issues are serious. I want fire officers to understand that there's no intention to paint anybody black or anything like that, but to ensure that the employer really understands the true nature of what is happening in the fire service and to put those checks and balances in place. One of the recommendations coming out of the 2016 report is for a fire commissioner above the chief fire officer to basically oversee management's operations and to ensure that whatever management does is within the confinements of law and policy. So those are the things that we've been really agitating for.
You're watching Newsmaker Live, and my guest here is Mr. Shane Felix, who is the chairperson of the St. Lucia Fire Service Association. When we come back in just a moment, your calls, so please stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. We'll put a telephone number on the screen right now so that you can call with your questions and the comments for my guest. He is Mr. Shane Felix of the St. Lucia Fire Service Association. And firemen issued a strike notice on the 13th of this month. Really thought that a day or two later that they would be back on the job. That has not been the case. They've had several meetings with, at least 2 meetings with the island's Labour Minister, Mr. Stevenson King, and you also heard from Mr. Felix that he had a conversation with the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Alan Chasney, last evening, and this has not resulted in any kind of positive resolution of this particular matter. So one can certainly envisage, based on what has been happening, the lack of any kind of positive outcome, that we probably are in for the long haul as far as this bidding issue is concerned, but we hope it does not really come to that. What are the implications of any kind of protracted lack of settlement on this particular matter? Okay, we have a call. Newsmaker Live, good evening, you're on the air.
Welcome to Down Here Broadcasting.
Hello? Okay, we lost the call. Go ahead. What's the implications of this dragging?
No resolution?
Yeah.
Tim, I don't think that this is going to get there. I really don't even want to consider, it would be, it will look terrible for both sides, both the St. Lucia Fire Service and the employer, for this to get to a point where it looks like nobody is really interested in getting it resolved. I don't think that fire officers are going to remain off the job indefinitely, for sure. I think that the employer thinks that if it gets to a point where...
My apologies, hold on. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air. Hello?
Yeah, good night, sir.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Yeah, let me answer one question, 2 questions. Mr. President, the fire service, the police, are the front line of the government serving. They represent the government. Good. How can fire service, an essential thing like that, go on strike? I think it would look more appropriate if they go on a go slow, not a strike. Because going on a strike is like them have the country at a ransom. And I think it would look better if you do a go slow than a strike. Getting the job done, but not getting the job done as fast as how you used to do it. But it's still getting it done.
Yeah, caller.
You can't understand what the strike is all about. Be honest with you, you can't strike.
Okay, the call.
You see, a go slow.
Okay, thanks a lot. He's saying a go slow and not a strike. What say you to this?
One of the things I've said to the Ministry of the Public Service is that the St. Lucia Fire Service has been on a go slow for years. For the mere fact that some of the issues that continue to fester in the department has kept fire officers frustrated consistently. We just can't seem to get to the point of, and one of the words that is usually used within the trade union movement is soulagement for employees. So in terms of a go slow, I think we've been on a go slow for a few years now, and the frustration, I think, is what really built and caused us to get to the point again of industrial action. Go slow is categorized within the framework of industrial action as well.
Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Yes, hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, I'm calling to speak to Ms. Shane.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. What I'm doing is, honestly, okay, not enough, man.
Can you repeat that, please? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, can you repeat your comment, please?
Yeah, I'm not hearing you guys clearly also.
Okay, but go ahead.
Okay, well, honestly speaking, what I find Shane and them doing, okay, it's not good for the public, because we the public feeling it. Okay, and honestly speaking, I feel they should deal with government, okay, and not include the public. Because if today or tomorrow my girlfriend or my family falls sick, I will be feeling it. And he himself have his family, okay, to see about. If they fall sick, they herself will be feeling it. Okay, so if they have the problem, deal with government and don't involve the public.
Okay.
Okay, yes, we know what they're going through. Okay? We know what they're going through, but don't involve the public, because we out there feeling it, yo. All of us, the bus drivers, the taxi drivers, okay, his family, our family, we all are one. But if they have to deal, okay, with the government, deal with it, and to not involve the public.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Right, and we have been dealing with the government again for years, and there are minutes from various meetings, speaking to the very same thing, promises, and we've been dealing with the government. It gets to a point where, you find that you are between a hard place and a rock, and you ask yourself, what next do you do? So people must understand that not just fire officers being affected or their families, but you must understand that within the environment that we are asking for this thing to be resolved. The government has not done anything. So we must get to the point of getting some kind of attention.
We have a call. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, team and Mr. Felix.
Good evening to you, sir.
Yeah. I may have 3 questions. My first is, how many days did the association give the government notice of the impending strike? That's 1. Number 2 is, what does the law, in Mr. Felix's understanding, detail that the service that they give, essential services, where does it fall on when it comes to strike and these sort of things? Number 3, if someone is to fall ill and they can make a direct lineage between they not being able to get service on time or certain things happening, falling from that, how would Mr. Felix feel if that individual, that citizen, that John Doe decide to sue and, sue the government, sue the departments and different things like that? And probably my last question would be, what has he learned from such action being taken? Is it bringing him any closer? Is it bringing the association any closer to getting a resolution?
Okay, let's take the last question.
4 questions. Oh,
What
this has brought the association closer to reaching a resolution? I think so. From 2014, we did not even have a document that was signed before us. 2019, we have a document that is signed. We're talking about the issuance of a cabinet conclusion and so on. So yes, we've made progress. We are learning in terms of going through these trenches and so on. That is the last question.
What about legal action? If somebody was not provided the service by the fire service because of this strike action, what if they take legal action against the government?
Well, again, the employer should be considering that, because there are litigation issues involved in this. And I'm glad that the caller is asking that, because I've said earlier in many media appearances that this is bigger than just the St. Lucia Fire Service. This is about St. Lucia. And for anybody to make this look like this is solely on fire officers, not understanding the plight of fire officers, and to completely remove the government from it would make it look like we are not dedicated to what it is that we do. So the St. Lucians must understand that the responsibility first falls on the employer to make sure that certain things are put in place to allow fire officers to go out there and execute their duties effectively.
What about this strike notice?
Yes, and I think he asked about the law and so on. There's no law stipulating what it is that fire officers have to do in terms of strike notice. Like the Essential Services Act, for example, requires that an essential service organization will have to give, I think, a month's notice before industrial action is instituted. But that also allows for the employer to have those 30 days to resolve the issue before industrial action can be instituted. That does not apply to the St. Lucia Fire Service. So we did issue a letter, just like we did in 2014. The law that is being spoken of in the media and so on has still not been quoted, except the grievance procedure in an agreement between the employer and the employees. And as I mentioned earlier, that if the employer is going to look into violations of that grievance procedure, which it is that I do not see as a violation. Minister King himself said he doesn't even treat this as industrial action. So I don't know of any law that says that we have to give industrial notice, action notice rather for industrial action.
But in terms of being reasonable, why issue a strike notice on March the 14th and then it takes effect the same day?
Oh no, it wasn't the same day. The letter was issued on the 12th.
Mm-hmm. just a few hours later.
No, we work 24 hours. You know, and that's critical though. As this point of, you know, the working hours and so on. We did give the letter on the 12th and informed the ministry that we would be out by the 13th. So again, there's no reasonableness, yes, courtesy and so on, yes. But in terms of a law, there's nothing pointing to that.
You have a call. Good evening, Newsbank Live, you're on the air.
Hi, good evening, Tim. Good evening to your guest.
Good evening to you, caller.
You know, I think I must applaud the actions of the Fire Association for the step that they're taking now. I mean, I've listened to a number of callers and even, you know, listened to the common person on the street. And the bottom line is, if your employer is not treating you well, there are procedures. And I think it has taken a while for the fire service to get to this point. I mean, I've heard the stories of what the firemen face at the various fire stations. And yes, it is true that it may put the country in certain issues in terms of emergencies. But if you're in a position where what you're asking for to make your job better, to deliver a better service to the public, they have a right to do what it takes to get the employer to understand that. And I think this is what we're missing as a St. Lucian public, that what is being done by the fire officers, it's in the interest of the country, it's in the interest to serve better. And I think we're too quick to blame the fact that, oh, what if somebody falls sick? The fact that even what they have to work with is rather limited, and they've been doing so much. What if they're now given what they need to work? I certainly think that would deliver a better service. And so certainly I believe that what they're doing right now is sending a very strong message to our policy, because I think too often we're afraid to take decisions. And I think Mr. Chairman, there may be that sacrificial lamb. But sometimes you believe and you have a passion for something, this is the position that you have to take. So I really want to applaud the gentleman and the association, and I do hope that good sense prevails and that the employers actually listen to the plight of the employees. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, caller.
What about people who are saying that this is political? What do you have to say to people who are saying that it's political, especially those who are supporting the government? And what do you have to say to people who might be trying to shield the opposition from any kind of responsibility, any kind of criticism as far as the role that they played in allowing this whole situation to be prolonged over so many years? Because I think both sides should take some kind of responsibility for this. But we have a call. Good evening. Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Good evening, caller.
And good evening to your guest as well.
Good evening.
Yes, I'd like to share my sentiments with the last caller. I must commend Mr. Shane Felix and the other members of the organization for standing for principles, standing for what they believe is right in the interests of the nation. It's not just for themselves. If they were selfish, I'm sure they would have taken a different route. Every man would have been fighting for his own development, his own promotion, or what have you. But they are fighting for better working conditions, equipment, which is what even a lot of members of the public complaining about when they call for assistance. And if for those who are against the industrial action, what will they say about the Beaufort-Jean's protests? Do you notice? Do they recall the level of protest action that took place to see justice is done? And in no time, justice was done. Justice prevailed where Amber Geiger was arrested and charged. Pending trial, had there been no protest whatsoever, would this case have gotten to where it is today? No. So sometimes we have to stand up to fight for our rights. If we don't stand up, we'll be walked over by the employer, we'll be walked over by various institutions who think that they have the power to do whatever they feel, and they are untouchable. So, Mr. Felix, hold on strong, keep praying. You have God on your side. You are not committing any crime. I don't know you as a corrupt fire officer. Keep up the good work. Don't give up.
Thank you so much.
Just something on what the caller said, Tim. Fire Service Headquarters, for example, and we sat with the current Minister of Home Affairs and pointed this out to him. Fire Service Headquarters is being manned by one ambulance. That is the city's main station. That is the island's main station. Do you know how often fire officers have to say to callers, the ambulance is out at the moment, we are unable to provide this service for you? We said to the minister, in the current crop of officers that you're training, can you put at least some additional numbers just for fire service headquarters to be able to allow us to man at least 2 ambulances at fire service headquarters so that the city and its environs can be provided a better service? You know, it's things like that that we're saying. We are the ones that the image comes on when somebody calls and says, I have this situation, and we have to say, we can't send an ambulance because it's currently out at the moment, you know.
You have the call. Good evening.
Good evening, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you.
Good evening, Mr. Felix.
You have to speak up a bit, please.
Yes, good evening.
And producer, from your end, we're getting some disturbance, some interference. So,
are you hearing me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Better.
Wonderful. Better is good. I'm going to take an angle here. Service before self. You know that saying, Mr. Felix?
I've heard it, yes.
Okay, wonderful. EMTs, yeah? You know, what was puzzling for me is to find out that, yes, I understand the reasoning behind strike, because it's not today that the report that came out stipulated guidelines and measures that should be introduced, SOPs, etc., correct? It's been a while.
Yes.
3 years, 4 years, thereabout?
1996, sir.
Wonderful. So it's been a while. So, yeah. Tim, you are correct to say what you said. Both sides are to blame. Right? My concern, too, falls down on the business of how industrial action is taken in this present time frame, one, and from this present department, if I would like to call. Yeah? As much as the callers say what they say, you have to take a stance, I agree. Last callers compared it to something that was totally different, in my opinion. You know, being that you're dealing with an essential service versus a family, directed. But that's the point he was trying to make, I understand. When you have to take action, you have to take action. But we must understand the North is the hub of the tourism business. So at the same time, I agree, you're putting the employer at risk, and you're putting me at risk as well, because the country already don't have money, and somebody is going to sue the government for God knows how much millions of dollars, and so the country keeps going broke. So it goes back to the governments, yes, in or out of power, when in power, whichever way you want to put it, to take an action. But I believe that you must look at what is the reality, the service to the people. Hence, I quoted, yes, service before self. And for me, it's important that even if you have low manning of a station, to say a station is completely closed, Groseley station completely closed, that I'm dealing with a situation and I have you on hotline, I call you directly, and I am told that the unit is coming out of Castries to come to the north, which is the hub. For me, I have some concern, because as much as, yes, you have to take action, I still believe that there is a duty bound. And as much as you refer to the employer, I would like to say that the employer really and truly is the people of St. Lucia, not so much so the government.
I agree. I agree, Kola.
So we have to look at that. So what should be the aim and purpose of your action should be to speak to us as a people, and ask us as a people to help you rally behind you, the fire service, because you're the representative of, to push the government to do better. But when now you take an action which affects me as the taxpayer, I am concerned, my friend, because I can tell you I dealt with a situation on the night, yes, and Groseley was closed, and I had to get information as to the ETA of the unit coming out of Castries, and thank God it wasn't life-threatening. I have a concern. If actions like these must take place, you must have standby people, and I know that is something that has been spoken about. You have the reserve police. I knew there was some idea to that for the fire service. I don't think it has materialized. But these are the things that have to be pushed, because we, the people, need to rally behind you and not you hold us hostage. Thank you for the time, Tim. And my brother, keep fighting the fight, but I think you need to kind of help us help you more. And I think we all can benefit, because your action will be beneficial to your department and to us as a people. Have a blessed one.
Thank you so much for calling, sir.
I actually agree with the caller. And one of the things I'd love to see come out of this is that protective services are placed in a position where, just as the collective agreement says that when a grievance is raised, that the grievance is dealt with rather promptly. Under the Essential Services Act, for example, you have a month to deal with the grievance before you can take it. I would love to see that, because what is happening on this current condition, as the caller is saying, that the public may feel that they are at risk. But as much as he said that the public is the employer, yes, but the public is still not saying to the persons whom they have elected to take care of this. We employed you, so take care of this and not make it look like just fire officers. So I'd love to see checks and balances to make sure that protective services are not, that issues are dealt with before it gets to the point of industrial action.
Get back to the calls. Good evening, you're on the air.
Hi, good evening, Timothy.
Hi, good evening.
I got the line. Hello, Shane Phillips. It's amazing that everybody is putting, well, not everybody, but some people are putting pressure on you, saying that you should consider going back to work. However, the employer is responsible in ensuring that their staff are happy, and standing with you and the firefighters. And it is time we as St. Lucian take a stand on principle, and I think this is what you are doing. Now, I am very, very concerned as a citizen that you guys are not at work. However, it works both ways. The Prime Minister, based on I listened to your conversation, the Prime Minister needs to bend and assist you all. And I think what you're basically asking for to return to work, if I'm wrong, you could correct me, is the reclassification. I don't see that's a big deal. Why the Prime Minister is not willing to bend? We elected this government, and as a citizen of this country, we expect him to do right by our firefighters.
Yes.
Now, it's very dangerous for us right now, in the sense that you guys are not at work. Stand on principle, hold the fight, and we are the people. We will be at this government to do what they have to do. Keep the fight, Shane.
Thank you so much, caller. And this is the point that I've been making, and the caller before the last made it, but sort of twisted it to make it look like it's the fire officers. But it is really, whether it is that the citizenry are the employers, but they have to understand what this is, like the last caller said, and to make sure that they put the emphasis on making sure that this is corrected, so that they get the kind of service that we are asking for to be put in place, so that they are treated in a certain manner.
Another call. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Yeah, Shane, I think on your spin, I once called you, and I questioned, whether there was some sort of grievance procedure. And you said that, you had the liberty based on whatever regulations to take action, to strike, at will. I did some research on it, and I'm not too sure you that correct on that. But anyway, I have a difficulty with I still have a difficulty with the abruptness of the action. But having said that, and I think, most St. Lucians, we know what you've been through. A couple of decades, the same thing over and over again. Have sympathized with the fire service for years. You understand? Ever since the first time you all went on strike for the 14 days. And I remember you personally, I really sympathize with you. You were vilified equally by supporters of the government of the day. You were almost like public enemy number one. I remember that. And I thought it was most unfortunate. Anyway, but Shane, are you aware that I think it's part of an international code of practice where we talk about labor relations, that persons ought not to negotiate under duress? Are you aware of that code of practice? I'm not. Huh?
I am aware.
Yeah, well, Shane, to me, I think, and I'm not, and that's not taking away from the validity of the all actions.
Right.
I am saying that I at least, some good faith should have been demonstrated in that regard. I think, nobody likes to negotiate under duress. I think it happens internationally, and I understand, I think the frustration have gotten to its head, and action ought to be taken. But I don't think anybody's supposed to negotiate under duress, and I support the GNT in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, caller. Again, caller, if you are to talk of duress, firefighters have been under duress for the same amount of decades that I'm talking about the existence of those issues. The employer has not come to our rescue during that duress. We got to the point again of the frustration, exceeding what it is that we could have maintained, and got to the point of doing something to get the employer's attention. And whilst it is that we were under duress and nothing was happening, now that we are at that point, the employer is coming to say to us that they are under duress and they can't negotiate. So again, I really think it is the employer who has to make some concessions rather, in terms of reaching us halfway and getting this thing done. Give us something, as I said to Tim earlier, one thing, one.
Good evening, Newsmaker Live. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, sir. You're on the air.
Good evening, Shane. Good evening.
Good evening.
Tim.
Good evening to you, sir.
I am a bit concerned when people call, clearly not familiar with what they're dealing with, talking about international codes of practice and not negotiating under duress. I will say that this is nonsense. What the action that has been taken cannot be construed as duress. This is normal practice that at particular points when organizations, trade union organizations, have determined that enough is enough, they take action. That action is not considered as any form of duress. When the time comes that the employer shows that he is going to respond positively, then it depends on the organization, the leadership of the organization, to reconsider and to decide how do we move from there in terms of the moves or in terms of the reciprocal moves that the employer has made. However, if the employer up to this point has been hard-headed, you take action, and that is not construed as duress. So do not allow ourselves to be misled by people who talk about what they know nothing about international code of practice and all this kind of thing. The other thing I want to point out is that on the question of notice, no kind of notice is required in situations like that, except, of course, with essential services. And I want to tell the caller, I think 2 callers ago, or was it the last caller, that the fire service is not an essential service.
Now, hold on, sir.
If he knew what he was talking about.
But in your opinion, shouldn't the fire service be considered an essential service? And I know you're a veteran trade unionist.
No. That has nothing to do with opinion. According to the law, right, there are certain services that are designated as essential services, and that is what we are dealing with. And I'm not dealing with any opinion at this point. In fact, not even in the advanced countries do we have a situation where police and fire and so on are dealt with under the rubric of essential services, right? But in terms of opinion, I do not want to prefer any opinion on that. We're dealing with what is the law. Okay?
No, but laws can change. That's why I was asking your opinion. Laws can change. Laws can change.
Oh yes, law can change, but I am betting with you. Law can change, but I am betting with you now that I am hearing certain people saying, well, because of what the fire service has done, it should be an essential service. The only reason, the clear reason why that point is being made is that, we see that you can take action. Now we can probably block you by bringing you under the Essential Services Act.
Yes.
You see? So we have to be very, very careful of the motives people. Look, I know situations where people who are, or services that are under the Essential Services Act still find themselves in situations where they have to act because the authorities or the employers take them for granted, even if they're under the Essential Services Act and they have given the requisite 30 days notice, etc., etc. So we must look at the motives for wanting to put people under the Essential Services Act. It is only now that the fire service has moved that you hear people talking about that. So we must be careful not to be reactionary. I believe that is a reactionary position right now, and we must be very, very careful of it. Yes, the fire service is a service that we want to have, like police, like other services for protection, and of course they are protective services. But what really gets at me is when some of us in this population are so selfish that we will not express solidarity with the fire service, right, in their situation. Rather, they are looking at their own personal situation right now, the inconvenience it might cause them. This is a selfishness we need to dispel. I think Shane has made the point very, very clearly that the fire service is the action the fire service is has been taking after a very long and well-considered deliberations spanning a couple of decades. Okay? He has made that point. He has also made that point that what they're asking for is not personal favors, it's not just something that for personal aggrandizement, but is actually what is going to redound to the benefit of the community, in that they will be able to serve the community more effectively. A lot of us are missing that point, right? We are missing that point. And to the person, the caller who was making the position that we, the population, are the employers, stop that nonsense, right? The population are not the employers. We elect people, and the people whom we elect are the employers, and they are the ones charged with the responsibility of effecting whatever needs to be effected.
So when we
so that cop out of...
When we elect a government into office, we don't consider ourselves to be the employer electing the politicians.
That is in a very broad sense, Tim, and you know that. That is in a very broad sense. But to say that, oh, you know, they should not, maybe they should not take strike action, they should be speaking to us, the populace, because we are really the employer, that is a cop-out. The people with the direct responsibility are the authorities in office. And let us stop playing games.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. I appreciate the contribution.
Thank you.
I want to give a brief history.
That's a veteran trade unionist.
Yes, I recognize his voice.
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to give a brief history on this issue of essential services with the fire service. This started back in 2005 when, for similar action by the fire service, the recommendation was made on the through the Ministry of the Public Service that the fire service should be considered to be made an essential service. That is 2005. Not through a formal report or investigation and so on. It was really out of actions that fire officers had taken. And this has been a concern for me, just as the caller said, and I appreciate really that the caller clarified this thing about essential services. Whereas internationally, fire, police, protection, corrections and so on have been classified as either paramilitary or military, and they are bracketed in the same. Essential services are water, electricity, that kind of thing. But yet, because fire officers are saying, we have been troubled for such a long time, we can't take it anymore, we want attention, you are now going to try to curtail fire officers' actions by putting them in a category that does not even reflect what it is that we do. And in my opinion, that is, again, another type of disrespect. The 2016 report also recommends for fire officers to be made an essential service. And I don't think that can happen, because our current laws would provide certain challenges that the employer may not be able to make us into essential services. As I said, it's been from 2005 to 2016, but just by virtue of what it is that we do, there's no real reason for it. It's just that to control what it is that we're doing and to prevent us from standing up against the things that are continuously affecting us, rather than dealing with it. You're just going to shift us on another piece of legislation and say, oh, we got them. They will never be able to do this again.
Final comments from you, sir.
Tim, I want to reach out to fire officers and say to them that I've said to fire officers on a number of occasions that I'm committed to this. This is a serious issue. I have been I have heard so many things about myself. You know, I've been threatened. I've been told if I don't do this, I may lose my life. People ask me, do you have a mortgage? Don't you have kids? Are you not concerned about your future? A former acting chief officer said to me during a discussion, aren't you concerned about the bars on your shoulder? You know, because I was able to get at least one promotion. He actually wrote to the government recommending my demotion, you know, for the kind of stance it is that I've taken. Those things are what really motivates me to continue to stand up for what it is that I'm standing for. And this has taught me to really be humble, committed, to be true to this, to remove politics. And you asked me about politics earlier, and I've explained this on numerous occasions. You know, I've never voted in any general elections. I have no interest in politics. I've been told that I should be a politician and so on. I have no interest, because the very things that we're fighting for with the politicians who can't make it happen, how do I get in there after having done everything that I'm doing? You know, so I want to tell fire officers that I'm really committed to this. But that you understand what it is that we're in now, and for you to begin to show support for this, and to get all of us to the point of being able to provide the professional service that we owe St. Lucians. Let me also ask St. Lucians to rally around us. You know, the unions have showed support. I think there's going to be a press release which is going to be sent out by the Trade Union Federation. I think Dominica was approached, and Dominican firefighters have said no, they're not going to come to St. Lucia, Barbados and so on. So this is genuine. We're true to this. We want attention. And I'm saying to the government, the employer of the day, that you don't even have to give us all 5. Give us one. Give us one, and we're on the job tomorrow. So meet us halfway. We're ready to go back on the job. Just give us one.
President of the St. Lucia Fire Service Association, Mr. Shane Felix, thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live. I'm sure that we'll get the opportunity to speak before the end of this week, maybe on my Newspin radio program on Real FM. But I hope that we don't even have to get to that point.
I really hope
Shane,
so,
you know?
I really hope
that
so,
will
yes.
be resolved very soon.
Definitely.
My name is Timothy Polia. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked.
Shake the bumper and touch it up. You know you want the African to the speaker. So look around and take a grab and show them that they will sing as well.
Once again, that's the broadcast. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for contributing via your calls. My name is Timothy Polia. Please join me tomorrow afternoon between 12:30 and 2 o'clock on Real FM, and that is for Newspin on 91.3 North and 91.5 South. Good night, and see you next time.